Evening, everyone. I'm Z,
and I'm Jake.
And welcome back to Hungry Talks. You're back. Where have you been?
Oh, you know, just casually winning games at the Uni Nationals. No big deal.
No big deal at all. Well, it's great to have you back, Jake.
It's great to be back, especially for today's episode on narratives with purpose.
Speaking of which, here's some food for thought. Do you think humans can have truly original experiences anymore? I mean, we always see people on social media sharing these unique moments, and then everyone in the comments goes, "No way, I thought I was the only one."
Right? When you think about it, with 8 billion people alive at the same time on Earth right now, maybe there aren't any truly unique experiences left.
Maybe not, but that's why we connect with stories so deeply. We see parts of ourselves in them, and they remind us that we're not alone.
And that's what we're exploring today, how storytelling can go beyond words and create real change, whether through journalism, marketing, or personal stories.
Exactly. We'll be chatting with Janak, a journalist with a global perspective who's worked with some of the world's biggest media outlets like the BBC and ABC Radio Australia.
And Lindy, a communications expert and mental health advocate who brings her unique perspective on inclusive storytelling.
So get ready to explore how narratives can shape perspectives, inspire change, and connect us in meaningful ways.
Without further ado,
Let's get started. This week's Quick Brief is brought to you by RMIT Giving.
This one's pretty special. The target audience is RMIT alumni and academics in history, music and film.
Your challenge is to create a billboard and a 60-second video concept to raise awareness and funds to bring Eliza, the Wurlitzer organ, back to its original home at the Capitol.
Hold on, Eliza the Wurlitzer? What's that?
Good question. Eliza is a historic Wurlitzer organ. Think of it as a 1920s version of a synthesizer. She was one of the first organs to play at the Capitol Theatre back in 1924 alongside silent films. After being relocated to Dandy Cinemas in Brighton over 50 years ago, there's now a plan to bring her back to where she truly belongs.
So the goal is to highlight why Eliza is so important to film history and culture, and to inspire people to support her return to the Capitol.
Exactly.
If you're up for the challenge, check out our socials for more details.
And remember to send your quick brief entry to quickbriefs@hungrytalks.com.au for a chance to be crowned Scam Champ of the Year.
Before we move on to our chat with Lindy, here's a short clip from the podcast Late to the Party, where she recently discussed the nuances of getting an ADHD diagnosis.
Vast room full of Lindys, all sitting there expectantly. Some are more disruptive than others. Perhaps a few are even hiding under the table. Would each of your diagnoses like to stand up and say their name?
Oh my God. All right. First one is ADHD. So
Yeah.
that happened in 2020. Thanks to TikTok, I realised that I was pretty most likely autistic as well. So went through the whole process of diagnosis for that last year and got the autism diagnosis.
How was that process for you?
Expensive, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really strange because like you do the testing and get the result and everything, but then it's like, what now? And then I sort of doubt myself and go, oh, am I? And then then I'm like, yeah, I definitely am. And like that sort of thing where you're thinking you've like rigged the test somehow or something, and you don't actually have it.
I guess it's possible. Bianca talks about that, is that she would actually mask to pass.
Yeah, right.
We're here with Lindy, a marketing and communications professional, currently the Senior Officer for Donor Experience at RMIT Giving. Lindy is also a freelance copywriter and a passionate advocate for mental health and inclusive storytelling, often drawing from her own experiences to inspire her work.
Welcome, Lindy. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thank you.
So, since today's theme is narrative with purpose, we thought we'd start with a bit of fun. And knowing you have a Gen Z son, we want to see how well you know the Gen Z slang. We'll give you some phrases and you tell us what you think they mean or try to use them in a sentence. Okay, ready? The first one. Slay.
Slay Queen.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, she knows. Okay, what about spill the tea?
That's something that happens on YouTube beauty channels a lot. People are spilling the tea.
Yeah.
So what's spill the tea?
When there's drama, when there's,
Like, what's the gossip? So like spill the tea.
Yeah, spill the tea, that's right, yeah.
in a go?
How about let him cook?
Oh, I haven't heard that one. Does it mean like make them suffer, let him suffer?
Well, that's
like
a good, that's a good, like, could go that way. It's
No, but
more into when you're onto something, when you're finding your way to something good. It's
it's like
him
when
cook
Jake's
when you're
talking,
doing
someone
well.
wants to interrupt him. I'm like, wait, let him cook. He's onto something. Yeah,
right,
let
okay.
him cook.
Okay. It's a new one.
All right. And how about last one, doing it for the plot?
Oh, I love doing it for the plot.
Yeah.
So you're doing it for the story,
For
you
the
know?
Yeah, it's
story?
like the
yeah,
Gen
like,
Z's version of YOLO. Like,
yeah.
yeah, you only
doing
live
it for the
once.
plot. Yep.
What about this is my 13th reason?
Is that from 13 Reasons Why?
Yeah, kind of.
But I didn't watch that, so I don't really know what it means.
So it's like saying I'm about to have a mental breakdown. So this is my
Oh, okay.
13th reason. Like this is why. Yeah. Ate and left no crumbs.
Is that something like I wiped the floor with it? Like I cleaned up?
Absolutely.
Something like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like
yeah.
you did something so great, you ate and left no
Yeah.
crumbs.
Yeah.
And let's do the math is not mathing.
Oh, I love that. I don't know how to put that into words.
It's literally something's not adding up.
It's not adding up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's exactly what it is. Yeah, yeah.
So that's
Love it. Yeah.
Okay, let's do the last one.
Wait, you want one more?
You understood the assignment.
You got it right. You
Yeah.
know what you're doing.
You nailed
Yeah,
it.
You did the right thing.
Okay. So I guess, did you learn something new?
I did.
Okay, what's he?
All right, so as Gen Z slang is always evolving, it's fun and silly because Gen Z likes to turn everything into a joke. It's how they cope.
Speaking of coping, Gen Z is big on mental health too. So Lindy, you were recently on a podcast called Life to the Party, where you openly talked about your experiences with ADHD and rejection-sensitive dysphoria. You have also written about it. So what inspired you to share these personal stories?
I think I was studying writing for the last few years until the end of last year, and I write non-fiction, and I kind of realised once I started studying that I loved sharing my own stories and sort of writing opinion pieces and things like that, because I like to be able to connect with people and have other people connect and sort of feel seen, because there's a lot of things that, you know, back in my day you just didn't hear other people's stories, like authentic stories, really, very, very much. So that's kind of what inspires me to like help people to feel seen.
Absolutely. And what was it like having your first non-fiction work published? Did that feel like a big achievement?
Yeah, it was so exciting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And what was the people's reaction to your article about the, what's it,
Rejection,
yeah.
dysphoria, yeah.
How did people react to it?
It was really good. The thing that I love about writing that kind of content is that you often get people's feedback, or like I've had people contact me on LinkedIn and say, I didn't know that there was a name for it. I feel the same thing. Like it's really, I just love the feedback that I get from it, you know, and knowing that I've sort of helped people out.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
So how do you see storytelling being used as a tool for mental health advocacy, and especially in the workplace for neurodiverse individuals?
I think, I'm not sure about in the workplace, but I just think it's going back to that helping people feel seen again and connecting with people, because I just think if you have a platform to share your story, I think if you can do it, then it's a good idea too. I just think it's really helpful if you're the sort of person that feels comfortable to do that, then why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you work in a role that involves both professional and donor communications. How do you balance personal authenticity with the goals of the organisation?
Yeah, so we've seen you wrote like sponsorships for students, right? Like stories that...
About scholarships.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a different thing to my personal writing, because although it is like non-fiction and I'll interview students and write up their story, it's not my voice. It's like the brand voice, I guess. It's the RMIT giving voice. So I just forgot what you asked me.
It's all right. So it's like, how do you balance personal authenticity with organizational goals?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I think when I'm writing for work, it's not about me.
Yeah.
So I can't put myself into it. Yeah.
And so
I'm
how do
writing
you channel the RMIT voice then?
I think it's just a process of learning as you go along, like, you know, just writing stuff, getting it edited by my manager, you know, and just learning as I go. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you share any project that you've worked on, whether it's personal or it's through the organisation, that you felt had the biggest impact, or your favourite in terms of its impact?
I think it was probably the first one that I had published, and it was on Mamma Mia, and it was about fat shaming.
Oh, okay.
And it really, a lot of people really connected with it, and it was such a good feeling. Like, you know, I think that's why I kept, you know, writing.
That was your first ever article you ever published?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it did really well, and, you know, got lots of hits and everything. And yeah, I was just really proud of it, and proud of the fact that I could connect.
Can you tell us more about what you wrote in the article?
It was about an experience I had a few years ago about being fat shamed by a doctor. And it was just a really horrible experience, and a really common experience, and one that I think people talk about it more these days, but this was a few years ago, and it wasn't necessarily like a topic that people were talking about that much in the media. It's a lot more common to hear stuff about it now, but and yeah, that was sort of my first. It made me so angry at the time that I just like, it just came out of me. Like I just wrote it, and it just came out of me. Yeah. And it just felt really authentic.
And what made you want to publish it, to share, to make people feel?
Just, yeah, like I was saying, to connect with people.
Interesting.
Yeah, and as you continue in your career and you continue writing, how do you stay inspired to keep publishing?
That's a good question. I think I've been working in my job for nearly 2 years, and this year I haven't actually written anything for myself because I'm writing a lot for work, so I'm really finding it hard to balance that. I get a little bit burned out from writing for my day-to-day and haven't actually this year written anything for myself, but it's something that I have planned. I'm working myself up to it. I've got some things I'm working on.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see more articles written by you.
Yeah.
So, last question. Since this week's quick brief is provided by RMIT Giving, which is you're part of the team, right?
Yes.
What advice do you have for the students tackling this week's quick brief, and what would you like to see from them?
I think I'd like to see sort of like a fresh approach. I feel like sometimes when you've got to stick to, you know, like the university branding guidelines and things like that, it can look a bit samey. So I think I'd like something fresh and creative, but while sticking to the brand colours and, you know, brand guidelines and that kind of thing. Just something fresh and new that we haven't seen before.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lindy.
Awesome.
You really just understood the assignment today.
Thank you.
Yes, you ate and left no crumbs. You fed us well. And before we chat with Janak, here's a video for a deeper understanding of who Eliza the organ is to help you guys with the quick brief.
All these years, nothing replaces the sound of a pipe organ. It's just the biggest badass sound.
It's like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. These ghosts just come out. It just transports you to another place. It transports you to another time.
It has so much sonority and so much clarity.
There's nearly limitless possibilities.
It's not an organ-y sound.
Sitting in a room with a theater organ playing is a really amazing experience.
The robustness of the sound and the way the whole room would just vibrate, and you could feel it in your body.
It's a living, breathing thing.
It's like being inside of this gigantic symbiotic organism.
You feel the history of movies. You feel the elegance of cinema, and it just gets into your soul.
This instrument is basically an early synthesizer version of an orchestra, created just to accompany silent film.
They were scoring and live foleying and live sound designing as the movie was playing. They always wanted the sound effects. They always wanted to get creative with car horns and music.
The possibilities that gives you for real-time performance and creativity is unparalleled.
Joining us now is Janak Rogers, an accomplished journalist with extensive experience in both radio and television. Janak has worked with major outlets like the BBC World Service, Deutsche Welle and ABC Radio Australia.
He's also a lecturer in journalism at RMIT and a regular producer at ABC Radio National. With his diverse experiences living and working across the globe, Janak brings a unique perspective to storytelling. Welcome, Janak. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we jump into the interview, let's have a bit of fun. We're going to play 2 auditory illusions and see what you hear. So first off, we're going to play Yanni or Laurel. So listen to this and let me know what you hear.
Laurel.
That was Laurel, 100%. Yeah. Did you get Laurel as well?
I can only hear Yanni.
Yeah, gosh.
I hear Laurel every time, like Laurel.
Yeah.
Laurel.
Yeah.
How do you hear Yanni? Say it. Like,
Yanni. Yanni, like that.
Laurel. Like
yeah.
That's it. I'll tell you, I was listening to it. I listened to it all day yesterday.
Oh, really?
I had it. I laid down.
Did it change across the day, or you?
I heard Laurel once.
Okay.
One time I was listening to it and I heard perfectly clear. I just heard Laurel, and then I could never find it again.
That's great. That was your token Laurel after a day of yarning. It's like we're just gonna have it. Yeah.
I did hear it.
Yeah, exactly. It's your way of relating to us.
It is. Yeah. One time. Yeah. That's it. So next up, we're going to listen to another audio clip, and this. Tell me if you hear brainstorm or green needle from this one.
Green needle. Green needle. Again, 100%.
I hear brainstorm.
You heard brainstorm?
Yeah.
Really? You were on my camp.
Yeah. Wait, what do you hear?
I hear both, actually.
Really?
You can switch it up.
You're a swinger.
So I did some research on it. I think it is quite interesting how it works. So the Yanni and Laurel clip, that's related to the pitch of it. When the pitch is down, it's easier to hear Laurel, and as the pitch gets higher, that's when Yanni comes out. So if you're on like an audio program and you pitch it up or down, it makes it easier for one of the words to come out.
Yeah.
And you know how there's that buzz, they do the hearing test and the beep slowly gets higher and higher and higher to test your hearing age.
Yeah.
Turns out people with younger ears are supposed to be able to hear Yanni easier. And then as your ears get tuned to a lower pitch, you start to hear Laurel a bit easier. But that's completely different to brainstorm and green needle. And that's just based on what you suggested. So the word that you're reading usually comes up as that, which is because I don't think you weren't reading brainstorm or green needle when that.
No, but I guess I heard brainstorm first. You said, is it brainstorm or green needle? Maybe I went with that. Yeah.
And as a radio producer, do you know what the mechanics behind this is? Like why people hear different sounds?
I don't. I'll take your answer though, that I do think the different sort of frequencies mean that you're probably hearing, and these ones that are like that could go both ways. I think it's partly just what you hear, like you're hearing relative to it.
Oh, that was interesting. Okay, so now let's get real. So Janak, you worked with prestigious organizations and lived in multiple countries. How have these diverse experiences influenced your approach to storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's baked in. Like, I'm half Indian, half English. I was born here, and I grew up between Australia, India, the States, and the UK. So, like, from day dot, like, I really felt that I was interested in the world, and for what it's worth, you end up with a kind of minority perspective as well. Yeah, you know, I ended up growing up as effectively a brown kid in what is a mostly white country, and so I was always really interested in other minority experiences and how to bring them closer to the mainstream. So yeah, I think it's just been baked into the way I see the world. I see the world as being full of people who are either central or peripheral, effectively, and some of those things you're just born into. And I guess part of the storytelling that I'm interested in doing is how do we get voices that are peripheral and inject them into the world in a more central way. So yeah.
What's the most memorable story that you've worked on in your time? Is there one that stands out as your favourite?
Oh, it's hard to say one. Yeah, I think the things that's been most amazing for me is the ability to go to quite remote places and speak with people who've maybe never met a foreigner and have certainly never been able to share their story in a way. And so that is really quite special because you do feel like a lot of responsibility as well. People often... And you don't always meet that responsibility either. You know, they talk to you in the hope that their life might change a bit, but you can't necessarily guarantee that, but you can guarantee that you'll take care of their story as much as possible.
And how do you even approach that when it's someone who's never met a foreigner before? How do you set that up where you go, well, we'd love for you to tell us your story. How do you even set that up?
And to add to that, how do you navigate cultural nuances when you're approaching them and also producing content for like an international audience?
Yeah, so a few questions in there. In terms of approaching people, so often it's just a matter of research and being on the ground and then just finding your way in. And particularly for communities who aren't like very, very connected to cities and things like that, then usually you're looking for some sort of intermediary who's got their trust and you work with them. So going through NGOs, going through other people who've got established relationships. Because it's true, if you just walk into a village with a microphone, people are going to be like, what are you doing here? But yeah, a good NGO can really help out. And there's things called fixers as well, which are people you can hire who know the local area and they can work as translators and organisers for you. And so they help you get to a place and speak to people once you're there. And in terms of the nuances as well, I mean, that's a big question where you are. I mean, I think above all, just trying to be respectful and to be really acknowledging of your place within it. You know, one thing that comes to mind, specific example was a story I did. There's a big conflict going on in the east of India, and a lot of tribals are very affected by it. And then I'm going out to this refugee camp doesn't even speak to it. They had their huts burnt. They were just living in a clearing, effectively in the forest. There was severe malnutrition. There was no doubt that kids in the village there were going to die. Like, it's just a tough environment to be in. And they also offered to they wanted to cook for us. And so that was me, my translator, and another journalist I was traveling with. And so you're in this extraordinary situation where they've made all this food for you and food that they're not giving to their children who are hungry at the time. And it's an enormous responsibility, but it's a great privilege to understand that your job in that point is to enjoy the food, to demonstrate how grateful you are for it, and to show kindness.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So everyone's got stories to tell, right? But how do you go about finding compelling stories? What do you think makes a story truly engaging?
Yeah, I mean, some of this stuff we try and think is teachable as well. And I think to a degree it is. There's elements of story that are pretty universal and pretty well established, which I'm sure it's stuff that's come up in your work as well, about character, conflict, stakes, action, all these things, reflection that are built into the mechanics of storytelling. And I think you can really stress test an idea by going, does it have those elements? And the key amongst them, I think, is conflict and character and stakes. They're the classic three that if you don't have that, you're veering into the world of opinion. And opinions are very cheap. They're great. Everyone's got a take, and there's a lot of topics. There's a lot of things you can talk about. But a story is a specific thing. I think it's got direction, it's got elements of transformation, it's got conflict. And if you can meet that threshold, you end up in in a place of sort of premium value, whether it's for advertising or for journalism or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you go about balancing that when it comes to making it engaging versus balancing it with the
Factual
authenticity?
information.
Factual information.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I think there is obviously a temptation in a lot of things to kind of oversource it, to zhuzh it up, and you see this like in broadcast, in just the production choices that you can have. You can get any sort of like dramatic music and go boom, 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 put it behind every second line, and at some point that takes away from the authenticity, and I think you lose people. So I think it's part of the job is to go, we are going to craft something, and we are going to use sound design, and we are going to use graphics to make something shine, but you want to make sure it stays in a place that it's authentic, and because you will just lose your audience, and you'll do a disservice to the story and to the people ultimately.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
To end the interview, what advice would you give to young journalists who want to ensure their work is both impactful and inclusive?
I think on the inclusive point, just think really carefully about how you cast for your stories. It's very easy to go to established experts and to go to like people who've already been mediatized around an issue. Your first layer of research is generally to search who else has talked about this. And it's a great way to find talent, because you go, okay, here's an expert who said it. But you end up with this kind of closed circle where people go back to the same people again and again and again. So I think casting for any story and thinking, in terms of intersectionality. It's not enough just to go, I'm going to put a racial lens on this, but put a gender lens on it, put a sexuality lens on it, and really think, who am I asking to be representative of an issue? Because a lot of what storytelling is a person speaking to an issue, and the issues affect many more people than that. So who you choose to speak for a story and to speak to an issue can really shape how that issue is defined. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I learned a lot from you.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move on to our off to the market segment, here's an ad that left a lasting impression on Z, and we think it's really effective.
We see countless ads every day, but only a few truly stick with us. Here's one that did. It's humorous, straightforward, yet impactful.
I've got an idea for a Heinz ketchup commercial. I was at this super posh restaurant. Super posh. The type of place that has chandeliers and paintings on the wall and way too many forks. I think classical music was playing, but maybe it was jazz. No, definitely classical. The hostess walks up to me and she says, "Mr. Sheeran, is this your first time dining with us?" And I say, "Yep." The waiter comes over, he's telling me about the specials. Super fancy, fancy vegetables, fancy sauces. I said, "Sounds fancy." So fast forward and the food comes. The waiter goes on to tell me, "We are proud to present this farm to table, blah, 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 posh and fancy, blah, 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 with a side of blah, blah, blah." You know, the food looked good. I just thought there was something missing. So I reach into my bag and I take out the only thing that can complete me. And at that point, the whole world came to a stop. And the waiter was screaming through his eyes. So that's my idea. Do you want to do it?
The message is simple and clear. No meal is complete without Heinz ketchup. And fun fact, Ed Sheeran had a Heinz logo tattooed on his arm before this collaboration. So, how can brands create a strong connection while staying authentic? I think the ad just showed us how.
The 30-minute film puts the spotlight on Joseph Kony, leader of the LRA, Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, a warlord wanted for the deaths of more than 30,000 and for using child soldiers. Kony was indicted by the International Court in 2005, but has never been captured.
We are going to make Joseph Kony a household name.
The filmmaker sets out to raise awareness about him and push people through social media to get governments to act. The video was posted on YouTube, reposted by millions on Facebook. It's trending on Twitter worldwide and was retweeted by pop icons and Canadian politicians. It challenges the famous and influential, including Prime Minister Stephen Harper, to help find Kony.
We have called upon for him to put his arms down. We are supportive of the regional militaries that are working around to capture him.
But the charity Invisible Children, which produced the film, openly supports the Ugandan government's army, which has itself been accused of atrocities.
In order for Kony to be arrested this year, the Ugandan military has to find him. This is the dream.
The goal of the filmmaker is to see Kony arrested by the end of the year.
Welcome to Off to the Market, where we take a break from providing the insight. This week we're delving into the Kony 2012 campaign by non-profit organisation Invisible Children. This campaign's goal was to make Kony famous and spark international efforts to capture him. While the campaign quickly became one of the most viewed viral videos of all time, it also faced significant criticism. Critics argued that Kony 2012 oversimplified a complex issue, presented an outdated portrayal of the situation in Uganda, and perpetuated a Western savior narrative. Questions were also raised about the allocation of funds in the campaign's overall impact. This controversy provides a crucial case study in the importance of preserving truth and nuance in media narratives. So that's what we're talking about today. Janak, it seems that Invisible Children had noble intentions going into this campaign. As a journalist, what do you think was their biggest mistake in how they presented the story?
Yeah, in some ways you raised, I think, some of the most interesting and lasting criticisms of what they did. I think if you also cycle back and put yourself in the shoes of that campaign at the time, you first have to go, well, what were they very successful at least on their goals, which was to raise awareness for this thing. There's a further conversation about how much value there is in just raising awareness and the things that were built into it that were perhaps problematic. But at first blush, like, I think you have to give some credit for an organization that was able to just get people talking. Like, that is a difficult thing to do, to get cut through and to get attention on there at all. I think where they fell into trouble was, I guess, how they went about doing that. And the criticisms you raised, I think, are core to that, yeah, which was really centralizing the experience of white people in that and this kind of white savior complex.
Yes. And or making it, about, well, ourselves, sort of, Invisible Children was really sticking their nose where it didn't belong.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's a criticism, and there's kind of like a marketing conversation to be had about it, but there's also a kind of a development and conversation to be had about it, is like, what are useful interventions by well-meaning humanitarians in these complex environments, and whether an organization based in the States that primarily seems to be very good at making videos should be trying to solve a very complex conflict very far away from them, and to put Joseph Kony at the heart of it. Yeah,
because as you said, if you judge it by just views, as a marketing campaign, it was wildly successful. But in terms of any social good, well, I mean, we'll talk about that. Why is it important for media campaigns, especially those with social or political goals, to maintain accuracy and nuance in their narratives?
Well, because if you don't, you drift too far from the truth. And the second you drift far away from the truth has an extraordinary ability to make itself known eventually. And I think if you go too far away from it, you get caught out. You do. And then the conversation shifts from being, hey, here's all the extraordinary work you were trying to do. Your intentions were good. You were clearly creative and clearly able to run a campaign. But your campaign then derails because you've strayed too far from the truth. So it's just crucially important. Do you want to be talking about the stuff you made up, or do you want to be talking about the stuff you want to talk about?
The idea that truth comes out eventually. Very encouraging thought. I hope it's true, yeah.
I think it is for the most part. Like, it's got a strange form of insistence to truth. And a lot of people obviously want to muddy the waters, and there's a lot of people who stake claim to the truth. But I think it's clear that if you veer too far away from it, at some point you stop talking about the thing you wanted to talk about, and you have to talk about the stuff you made up or got wrong.
Yeah. How well do you think news outlets covered this campaign?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I went back and watched some of the videos from the time, and it was covered, I think, initially just as a phenomenon, and the criticisms emerged once it became so wildly successful. I think if it was a video that had gotten 1,000 views and a little bit of A, we wouldn't be talking about it, and B, we wouldn't expect it to have had a high ethical, I mean, we would want it to have a high ethical threshold, but the bigger it is and the more impactful it is, the more pressure it is that they get things right. And I think the media caught on eventually. And unfortunately, I remember the director as well. He had like about a week after things really exploded, he was caught running around naked. They really had to do all this kind of crisis communications to clean up after themselves. And then once the heat had gone away from, hey, look at this extraordinary campaign that's got really successful, people started to look at the actual content and go, well, why is it all about this guy's kid, a white kid from the States? Why most of the shots about white people wearing wristbands, and can you like and share, and the slacktivism conversation came out of it as well. So
yeah. In journalism, there's a fine line, I think, between simplifying a story for accessibility and oversimplifying it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, what was interesting is I read an article in the New York Times when I was just reading in about this today, which was like 10 years on from Coney 2012, and it interviewed the director, and he was quite, I thought it was an interesting argument to make. He was like, we were criticized for simplifying it, but my job was to simplify it because nobody's interested in the complexity of it. So he takes it as a compliment when people say we simplified it, because, which I think it's a bit disingenuous. I think he takes it too far, because there's a clear argument that they oversimplified it, and they were also just playing, in a puddle that they shouldn't have been in. Like so there's those two criticisms that I think are lasting criticisms of it. But yeah, a lot of the work, and anybody who works in storytelling, I just think you're aware of the constraints of the formats. You have to cut things down. You speak to somebody for 40 minutes and you use 3 minutes of it. Yeah. And that's just the nature of the work, unfortunately. So
I mean, cutting my interviews for this segment, which we'll see in a second, I certainly feel that onus, like, ooh, I got to preserve what this person said. Am I misrepresenting what they've given to me?
Yeah.
So I feel the...
it's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you speculate on what part of this campaign crossed that line into oversimplification?
I think the idea, I mean, it seems like the core criticisms, again, that really stuck was the stuff about, just the white saviorness of it. And also the fact that at the time, Joseph Kony was not the target that they made him out to be. Like, the experts who were working on the ground all seem to say that, listen, you're presenting this person as the bogeyman to beat all bogeymen, and he's just not an operator in the way he was previously. So I think that was really fundamental to going, hey, you've missed the mark here. You've created a very successful marketing campaign, but the target is not somebody who you're misrepresenting his influence in the region at the moment, and that's deeply unethical. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right on that, because that's what came out in the interviews. Was a lot of people said, a lot of their criticisms were, he wasn't the big bad guy, the big bad evil. I mean, he was bad, right? Let's not get that wrong, but he wasn't the main villain that they'd made him out to be.
Yeah, and also like what they were calling for was capture Kony, which was a further military intervention. Yes. And it turned out that Invisible Children had quite close relations with the Ugandan army, and there's clear questions not only in terms of the problem you're defining, but the solution you're defining.
Yes.
And the solution they defined was more military intervention in an area that probably didn't need it. And in for an organisation that was about the children, the idea that capturing Kony would take care of the children, I think that wasn't even clear to many people at the time, beyond the kind of the energy they managed to kick up around Kony as a character. Yeah.
To what degree do you think the flimsiness of this narrative contributed to the backlash that followed?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think the backlash is twofold. One is because of the extraordinary success they had. And again, I really want to qualify how impressive that is, given the long arc of things. But I also want to acknowledge, that it's very hard to get people's attention, particularly on Africa, particularly on parts of the world that aren't seen as sexy or that are seen as endemic conflict issues. It's very difficult to get them into the news cycle, let alone to get people to engage. So they clearly hacked something there that you can learn from, but you should also absolutely learn from the mistakes, of which they made many. Yeah, and hence the flimsy storytelling, the misdirection of the target, the misdiagnosis of the solution, a range of things there.
It all caught up with them.
It did, yeah.
I spoke to some students about their views on the campaign. This is what they had to say.
What do you know about Kony 2012? it was a long time ago, but I think when I was in primary school, there was a really viral video on YouTube.
I remember being in school and seeing posters everywhere, and I remember our teacher making us watch the quick documentary about it.
It was this really horrific guy who sort of jumped in various African nations and would kidnap children and make them child soldiers.
I think it's ultimately he wasn't important in the real scheme of things, and then every other warlord was doing the same thing. So to bring him in particular was weird.
I remember watching the video and being yeah, this sounds kind of bad, but not necessarily worse than anything else in the world. And so it was crazy that it went so viral.
Do you think that campaign was effective?
I think it was effective in the sense of getting his name out there, because even if I don't know many details, I still remember the name Kony 2012. That'll always ring a bell. So they did, if their goal was to just make everyone know about it, they did a good job.
Well, at the time, definitely, because it was huge. I didn't know it was by an organization. I thought it was just by one guy. But so I suppose the brand awareness wasn't great.
Maybe not, but maybe yes, because here we are 12 years later and we remember Kony.
Yeah, they certainly made him famous.
Yeah, which was that the point?
And how effective the publicity was, that's probably a different story.
Ultimately, were they effective in achieving anything? Not really. It was a disaster, and they didn't get him. They couldn't get him. Why did the US have to give special treatment to this one particular warlord that was just as bad as the rest of the warlords?
How truthful do you think Invisible Children were in their material?
Good question. I think conventional wisdom was that a lot of it was a sham.
I imagine they would have been decently truthful.
Look, I'm sure they had some ulterior motives. He just wanted, I'm pretty sure, to just, ride the wave as much as he could. Mm-hmm. And I remember that he, the breakdown was so bad that he was running around nude around the streets and stuff and talking gibberish and all that.
Didn't the guy who made the video then a year later he got arrested for public indecency?
He had a proper nervous breakdown, which goes to show that someone's doing too much too quickly maybe isn't the most effective way to keep the message. So I feel that would instantly ruin a lot of credit that he had, if he had any.
Yeah, you think running around naked ruined his credibility?
Yeah, because then people could point that out more than his message or what he was trying to actually say.
I think you might be onto something there. Well, thank you for that interview.
One of the big takeaways from my interviews was the general skepticism and confusion around the goals of the campaign. In 2012, many were also confused about the aim of the campaign and where the donations were going. Janak, do you think the reaction might have been so bad if they'd been clearer about their goals and methods?
I think, yes, yeah. I mean, part of it though just seems that their goals seemed misguided.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem. So you can clarify your goals, but if they're misguided goals, you've just given us clarity about something that's misguided. So I think they probably should have set better goals to begin with.
Yes.
And then given us clarity about it. And it might not have derailed as badly.
Okay, yeah. And after all of this, how much of a positive impact do you think that Invisible Children ultimately had?
To be honest, I don't know. I did go on their website and they seem to be trying to present that they're still doing work on the ground and that it's had a longer positive tail. I'm in no position to assess that, but it'd be an interesting, it's clear the New York Times did a 10 years on thing. It would be interesting to go back, 20 years on. I mean, Joseph Kony's still about. He's not considered a threat. So in that way, the campaign was not effective. If it was a campaign to capture Kony, it clearly failed.
2012.
Well, yeah, in 2012. Yeah,
they missed the mark
by the end of the year.
one.
Exactly. So it failed on their own terms. What would be interesting to know is they did raise a lot of money, and and I know there was criticism about how much that money went to making more videos, and there was just a bit of a kind of a hungry news cycle around it. But they might have had positive impacts with the money they didn't spend on videos. But I think that's something that journalists should work out and put some scrutiny on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me on the segment.
You're welcome.
That's all we have time for this week on Off to the Market. If you have any questions or comments for the team here at Hungry Talks, please send them into the email shown on screen and we'll respond to them next time.
All right, that brings us to the end of this episode.
Yes, whether you're crafting a campaign, writing an article, sharing your story, or just having a conversation, remember, your narrative has the potential to inspire, connect, and create real change. Also, I still can't believe you only heard Yanni.
I know, it feels strange to have ears that are just wrong. It makes me wonder what else I've been hearing completely wrong this whole time. I've also been thinking about what you said earlier, about humans not truly having unique experiences.
Okay, and?
I've given it my absolute best, and this is what I've come up with.
Okay.
So, what it is, I'm wearing a pink hat, hula hooping, while avoiding a sword from a dinosaur.
Oh, okay, I'll give you that. Okay.
Thank you to everyone here in the live studio audience and to those watching from home.
We hope to see all of you next week. Until then,
stay curious.